Okay, so this is the Daf Yomi for Shabbat, February 22nd, 2025. We're in Sanhedrin 67. I didn't get this out before Shabbat, I'm sorry. So you'll probably get this on Sunday now. But anyway, so it says, so this page just starts out and says Simana Ba'alma. So, and it's basically means it's merely a mnemonic. But I'll just read what the editors put into this for this edition here. So this verse is not relevant to this halacha. It is cited merely as a sign indicating that just as the halacha of a betrothed young woman pertains to her first intercourse, so too the halacha of a daughter of a priest who committed adultery pertains to a case where it is her first disqualification from the priesthood. Okay, so new Mishnah now. With regard to the case of an inciter, listed among those liable to be executed by stoning, this is an ordinary person, not a prophet, and it is referring to one who incites an ordinary person and not a multitude of people. What does the inciter do? He says, there is an idol in such and such a place, which eats like this, drinks like this, does good to its worshippers like this, and harms those who do not worship it like this. Okay, the Mishnah states a principle with regard to the halacha of an inciter. It says, with regard to all those mentioned in the Torah who are liable to receive the death penalty, if there are no witnesses to their transgressions, the court does not hide witnesses in order to ensure and punish them, except for this case of an ensnare and punish them except for the case of the inciter. The Mishnah elaborates. If the inciter said his words of incitement to two men, they are his witnesses, and he does not need to be warned before the transgression. They bring him to court and stone him. If he said his words of incitement to one man alone, that man's testimony would not be sufficient to have the inciter executed. Therefore, he says to the inciter, I have friends who are interested in this. Tell them too. This way there will be more witnesses. The Gemara continues. If the inciter is cunning and he knows that he cannot speak in front of two men, the court hides witnesses for him behind the fence so that he will not see them. And the man whom the inciter had previously tried to incite says to him, say what you said to me when we were in seclusion. And the other person, the inciter, says to him again that he should worship the idol. And he says to the inciter, how can we forsake our God in heaven and go and worship wood and stone? If the inciter retracts his suggestion, that is good. But if he says, this idol worship is our duty, this is what suits us, then those standing behind the fence bring him to court and have him stoned. The halacha of an inciter includes one who says, I shall worship idols, or one of the following statements, I shall go and worship idols, or let us go and worship idols, or I shall sacrifice to an idolatrous offering, or I shall go and sacrifice to an idolatrous offering, or let us go and sacrifice, or I shall burn, meaning incense, or an idolatrous offering, or I shall go and burn, or let us go and burn, or I shall pour, meaning a libation, or I shall go and pour, or let us go and pour a libation, or I shall bow to an idol, or I shall go and bow, or let us go and bow. So any of those combinations. The Gemara now says, the Mishnah teaches with regard to the case of an inciter, this is an ordinary person. The Gemara infers, the reason he is executed by stoning is that he is an ordinary person, but if he is a prophet, he is executed by strangulation, not by stoning. This Mishnah states further, and it is referring to one who incites an ordinary person. The Gemara infers the reason he is executed by stoning is that he incited an individual, but if he subverted a multitude of people, he is executed by strangulation. Consequently, whose opinion is expressed in the Mishnah? It is the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, as it is taught in Braita. A prophet who subverted others to participate in idol worship is executed by stoning. Rabbi Shimon says he is executed by strangulation. Likewise, the subverters of an idolatrous city are executed by stoning. Rabbi Shimon says by strangulation. The Gemara challenges. Say the last clause of the Mishnah, that is, say the following Mishnah with regard to the case of the subverter listed among those liable to be executed by stoning. This is one who says, let us go and worship idols. And Rav Yehuda says that Rav says, in this Mishnah, the sages taught the case of the subverters of an idolatrous city. Here we arrive at the opinion of the rabbis, who hold that those who incite a multitude of people are also executed by stoning. It is possible that the first clause of the Mishnah expresses the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, and the last clause expresses that of the rabbis, meaning the majority. So Ravina says the entire Mishnah is in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis, meaning the majority, and the Tana teaches the Mishnah employing the style of not only this, but also that. In other words, the Mishnah should be explained as follows. Not only is one who incites an individual executed by stoning, but even one who subverts an entire city is executed by stoning. Okay, Rav Papa says, when the Mishnah teaches with regard to one who incites that this is referring to an ordinary person, it is not indicating that a prophet is not included in this halacha. Rather, it is referring to the hiding of witnesses behind a fence in order to ensnare the inciter, as his life is treated with contempt and derision, as though he were an ordinary person, a simpleton, right? As it is taught in Baraita, and with regard to all the rest of those liable to receive the death penalty by Torah law, the court does not hide witnesses in order to ensnare them and punish them, except for this case of an inciter. How does the court do this to him? The agents of the court light a candle for him in an inner room, and they place witnesses for him in an outer room in the dark, so that they can see him and hear his voice, but he cannot see them. And the other person, whom the inciter had previously tried to incite, says to him, "Say what you said to me when we were in seclusion." And he says to him again that he should worship the idol. And the other person says to him, "How can we forsake our God in heaven and worship idols?" If the inciter retracts his suggestion, that is good. But if he says, "This idol worship is our duty, this is what suits us," the witnesses who are listening from outside bring him to court, and they have him stoned. And the court did the same to an inciter named Ben Stada from the city of Lod, and they hanged him on Passover Eve. Uh-oh. The Gemara asks, why did they call him Ben Stada when he was the son of Pandera? So, do you guys know who that is? So, So that is actually the name of that metal band, Pantera or Pandera. That's who that's referring to. So if people are familiar with that, Ben Stada is the same. I don't want to go into that. Not today. Rav Hista says perhaps his mother's husband, who acted as his father, was named Stada, but his mother's paramour, who fathered this mamzer, was named Pandera. The Gemara challenges, but his mother's husband was Papos ben Yehuda, not Stada. Rather, perhaps his mother was named Stada, and he was named Ben Stada after her. The Gemara challenges, but his mother was Miriam, who braided woman's hair. The Gemara explains, this is not a contradiction. Stada was merely a nickname, as they say in Pumbedita. This one strayed, Stat da, from her husband. Stat da, I'm sorry, like two words. With regard to the case of the subverter listed among those, so back to the Mishnah, it says, with regard to the case of the subverter who listed among the liable to be executed by stoning, this is one who says to a multitude of people, let us go and worship idols. The warlock is also liable to be executed by stoning. One who performs a real act of sorcery is liable, but not one who deceives the eyes, making it appear as though he is performing sorcery, as that is not considered sorcery. Rabbi Akiva says in the name of Rabbi Yehoshua, for example, two people can each gather cucumbers by sorcery. One of them gathers cucumbers and he is exempt, and the other one gathers cucumbers and he is liable. How so? The one who performs a real act of sorcery is liable, and one who deceives the eyes is exempt. The Gemara now says, with regard to the case of subverters mentioned in the Mishnah, Rav Yehuda says that Rav says the sages taught here in the case of the subverter of an idolatrous city. Accordingly, there is no halakhic difference between one who incites individuals to idolatry and one who subverts an entire city. Both are liable to be executed by stoning. The Mishnah teaches that the case of the warlock is referring to one who performs a real act of sorcery. The sages taught in Baraita, the verse, "You shall not allow a witch to live," Exodus 22:17, does not refer only to a female who practiced sorcery, but both a man and a woman are included. If so, why does the verse state a witch? This is because most women are familiar with witchcraft. In what manner is their death sentence administered? Rabbi Yoshi Haglili says, it is stated here, you shall not allow a witch to live. And it is stated there with regard to the conquest of the Canaanites, you shall allow nothing that breathes to live. Deuteronomy 20, verse 16. Just as there the Canaanites were to be killed by the sword, so too here the execution of a witch is administered by the sword. Rabbi Akiva says, it is stated here with you shall not allow a witch to live, and it is stated there with regard to Mount Sinai, no hand shall touch it, for he shall be stoned or thrown down, whether it be animal or man. it shall not live. Exodus 19, verse 13. Just as there the verse speaks of stoning, so too here a witch is executed by stoning. Rabbi Yoshi Haglili said to him, I derived the meaning of the verse, you shall not allow a witch to live, from the verse, you shall allow nothing that breathes to live, via a verbal analogy between two similar phrases. But you derive the meaning of the verse, you shall not allow a witch to live, from the verse, it shall not live, which is a less similar phrase. Rabbi Akiva said to him, I derived a halacha concerning Jews from a halacha concerning Jews, with regard to whom the verse included many types of death penalties. Therefore, the fact that the expression it shall not live refers to stoning when stated with regard to Jews is especially significant. But you derived a halacha concerning Jews from a halacha concerning Gentiles, with regard to whom the verse included only one type of death penalty, namely decapitation. Since that is the only type of capital punishment that applies to Gentiles, it cannot be derived through a verbal analogy that the same type applies to the Jewish sorcerer. So the Braita continues, Ben Azai says, and it is stated, you shall not allow a witch to live, Exodus 22, verse 17, and it is stated in the following verse, whoever lies with an animal should be put to death, Exodus 22, 18. The fact that the Torah juxtaposes this matter to that matter to teach that just as one who lies with an animal is executed by stoning, so too a warlock is executed by stoning. With regard to this derivation, Rabbi Yehuda said to him, and because the Torah juxtaposes this matter with that, shall we take this person out to be stoned? Should he be sentenced to the most severe type of capital punishment on that basis? Rather, the source is as follows. A necromancer and a sorcerer were included in the general category of warlocks. And why were they singled out from the rest with their prohibition and punishment stated independently? This was done in order to draw an analogy to them and say to them, just as a necromancer and a sorcerer are executed by stoning, so too a warlock is executed by stoning. The Gemara asks, according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda as well, let the punishment with regard to the necromancer and a sorcerer be considered two verses that come as one. That is, teach the same matter, and therefore the halacha of other cases cannot be derived from it, according to the principle that any two verses that come as one do not teach about other cases. In other words, if a halacha is taught with regard to two individual cases in the Torah, the understanding is that this halacha applies only to those cases. Had this halacha applied to all other relevant cases as well, it would not have been necessary for the Torah to teach it twice. The fact that two cases are mentioned indicates that they are the exceptions rather than the rule. Rabbi Zechariah says, this means that Rabbi Yehuda holds that two verses that come as one do not teach about other cases. Rabbi Yochanan says, why is sorcery called kishafim? Because it is an acronym for contradicts the heavenly entourage. Shemach Shin Pamalia Shel Mala. Sorcery appears to contradict the laws of nature established by God. Shemach Himin Pamalia Shel Mala. Okay, so the verse states, to you it was shown so that you should know that the Lord is God, there is none else besides him. Deuteronomy 4:35. So Rabbi Hanina says, this is true even with regard to a matter of sorcery. Sorcery is ineffective against a righteous person. And it's very interesting. He says that because, that was actually something that Bilam actually recognized. And he said that there's no sorcery in Israel. And that was also, we see, if you follow the stories of the Baal Shem Tov, that was also something that he claimed was also a protection because he had exorcised some demons and just using his name. And he said that the reason why they would move by his name because his name was Israel and there's no sorcery in Israel. But anyway. Let's see. The Gemara relates, this was a certain woman who was attempting to take dust from under the feet of Rabbi Hanina in order to perform sorcery on him and to harm him. Rabbi Hanina said to her, if you succeed, go and do it. I'm not concerned about it. As it is written, there is none else besides him. So he's like, whatever, you basically, it's not going to affect me at all. And as a matter of fact, that's kind of like just the way that it's seen all through time. It's ineffectual. It affects these people they live under, just like I said with astrology. We're outside of astrology. It was a system that the Gentiles had access to, and they looked towards it because they didn't have the true information. But we're taught that if you go and seek out astrological answers, you're bound by it. But if you don't seek them out, you're free from that system. But it doesn't mean that if an astrologer comes and gives you information about something, you can take the information, do whatever you want with it, you can act upon it, but you're not under that system. Okay. The Gemara asks, is that so? But doesn't Rabbi Yochanan say, why are sorcerers called Makashfim? Because it is an acronym for contradicts the heavenly entourage. This indicates that one should be wary of sorcery. The Gemara answers, Rabbi Hanina is different, as his merit is great, and sorcery certainly has no effect on such a righteous person. Rabbi Avu Bar Nagri says that Rabbi Chia Bar Abba says in the verse, and the magicians of Egypt did in that manner with their secret arts. Exodus 7:22. Balatehem is that secret arts. Okay, so these words are describing acts of employing demons which are invisible and their actions are therefore hidden. Balat. With regard to the similar term, Balahatehem, Exodus 7:11, these are secret acts of sorcery which sorcerers perform themselves without using demons. And likewise it says, in the flaming lahat, sword that turned every way, Genesis 3:24, referring to a sword that revolves by itself. And I want to point out, this is actually something that it seems to be a protection also within the Shema that we say. Because the very first letter and the very last letter of the Shema spells a name of the category of the dark forces, which shows that when the very middle word is one of the names of God. So if you bring your attention to that, and Hashem is your God, which that's what Shema says, then those forces are on the outside and they can't penetrate. And that's exactly how the alphabetic structure of the Shema is set up. Okay, so Abaye says, a sorcerer who is particular about using a certain utensil for his sorcery is employing a demon, and one who is not particular about using a certain utensil is performing an act of sorcery. Abaye says the halachot of sorcery is like the halachot of Shabbat, in that their actions can be divided into three categories. There are some of them for which one is liable to be executed by stoning, and there are some of them for which one is exempt by punishment by Torah law, but they are prohibited by rabbinic law, and there are some of them that are permitted ab initio. Oh, I hate Latin terms. Abaye elaborates, one who performs a real act of sorcery is liable to be executed by stoning. One who deceives the eyes is exempt from punishment, but is prohibited for him to do so. What is permitted ab initio is to act like Rav Hina and Rav Oshaya. Every Shabbat Eve they would engage in the study of the halachot of creation, and a third born calf would be created for them, and they would eat in honor of Shabbat. So it's almost like this idea of golem. But anyway, Rav Ashi said, I saw Karna's father perform a magic trick in which he would blow his nose and cast rolls of silk from his nostrils by deceiving the eye. See, he was talking about an illusionist is basically what that is. With regard to the verse, and the magician said to Pharaoh, this is the finger of God, Exodus 8:15. Rabbi Eliezer says, it is derived from here that a demon cannot create an entity smaller than the size of a barley grain. Consequently, the magicians were, because that's what it was dealing with the lice that came upon the land, the little tiny bugs or whatever. I guess a lot of times they just translate it lice, because they couldn't match the same thing. Because they're saying that demons cannot create an entity that is smaller than the size of a barley grain. Okay. Consequently, the magicians were not capable of duplicating the plague of lice, and they realized that this is not an act of sorcery, but was performed by God. Okay. Rav Papa said, by God, they cannot create even an entity as large as a camel. They do not create anything. Rather, they can gather these large animals, leading them from one place to another. They cannot gather those small animals. Rav said to Rabbi Chia, I myself saw a certain Arab who took a sword and sliced a camel and then beat a drum, betavla, and the camel arose from the dead. Rabbi Chia said to him, was there blood and excretion afterward in that place, which flowed from the camel and then it was sliced? Rather, since there was none, that was clearly a deception of the eyes and not sorcery. The Gemara relates, Ze'eri happened to come to Alexandria of Egypt, and he bought a camel. When he was about to give it water to drink, the magic thawed when the donkey touched the water, and it was revealed that it was not a donkey, and it turned into the plank of a bridge. So this is why the mikveh is so powerful, because things can't penetrate the water. Certain forces, certain things like that. It cannot penetrate the water. They're two different worlds, or two separate worlds. Okay, the ones who sold it to him said to him, if you were not Zeri, a distinguished person, we would not refund you the money for the donkey, because they were performing stuff and they were selling worthless stuff as if it was a donkey. Is there anyone who buys an item here and does not examine it first with water? Since sorcery was widespread there, anyone who bought an item examined it in order to find out if it was affected by sorcery. And if one did not examine an acquired item by exposing it to water, and it turned out to be under a spell, he suffered the loss. The Gemara relates, a man named Yomi arrived at a certain inn. He said to the innkeepers, give me water to drink. They brought him flour mixed with water. He saw that the lips of the innkeeper woman were moving, and he cast a bit of the drink to the ground, and it turned into scorpions. And he understood that the innkeeper performed sorcery on the drink. Yomi said to them, I drank from yours, you two drink from mine. And he also performed sorcery on the drink. He gave it to her to drink, and she turned into a donkey. He rode upon her and went to the marketplace. Her friend came and released her from the sorcery, and the people saw him riding on a woman in the marketplace. It is stated with regard to the plagues of Egypt. And the frog came up and covered the land of Egypt. Exodus 8, verse 2. Noting the term the frog, what is that, Zephardea? Yeah, Zephardea is written in the singular. Rabbi Elazar says, at first it was one frog. It spawned and filled the entire land of Egypt with frogs. Okay, the Gemara comments, this matter is a subject to a dispute between Tanaim, or rabbis of the Mishnah. Right? Rabbi Akiva says, it was one frog, one Zephardea, and it spawned and filled the entire land of Egypt with frogs. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said to him, Akiva, what are you doing occupying yourself with the study of Agada? This is not your field of expertise. Take your statements to the tractates of Nagaim and Ohalot. In other words, it is preferable that you teach the halachot of the impurity of leprosy and the impurity of imparted in a tent, which are among the most difficult areas of halacha and are within your field of expertise. Rather, the verse is to be understood as follows. It was one frog, it whistled to the other frogs, and they all came after it. In the Mishnah, Rabbi Akiva says, in the name of Rabbi Hoshua, the two people can each gather cucumbers by sorcery, one of whom is exempt, as he merely deceives the eyes, and one of whom is liable, as he performs real sorcery. And that's the end of 67.